So here you are. You're all, each of you is there in your here spot, your spot for being here. And I think we should never overlook the here-ness of this moment, the here-ness of where we are and where we're going to meditate. To be here, not as a coincidence, not as something to overlook, not as something that is insignificant, but rather here is the most important place for this moment, for this meditation. And so to assume a posture for being here, to be rooted to this place and to this time, and to feel the connection of your body to this location. The way the weight of your body is received by whatever body that in a sense stops the pull of gravity, that keeps you in this location. And to adjust the body a bit. Especially it's nice to adjust it so the breathing can be freer, more relaxed, more open, without getting tense and without straining. But maybe it's something you can do with the spine that frees up the front of the torso so the breathing can be more easeful. Maybe sitting up a little straighter in the spine. And then to see if you can take some deeper breaths that are enjoyable for you to take. So maybe for you it's to do just a little bit deeper than what you're already doing, or maybe doing it slowly. Maybe the feeling of depth or fullness of breathing is done more in the belly or more in the top of the chest or middle of the chest. Or maybe the sense of enjoyable, fuller, deeper breathing is a more subtle expansion of the back rib cage. Or maybe there's something pleasant about, in a deep, full breath, the gentle pressure downward as you breathe in. The diaphragm pushes down the intestines and innards there. And perhaps that pushing down, a gentle pushing down, is a grounding here to this spot. And as you exhale, is there any place in your body that would be kind of pleasant or enjoyable to relax or soften? instead of maybe pleasant or enjoyable, any place in your body as you exhale, it would be nice to relax. And then letting your breathing return to normal. And take a few breaths to familiarize yourself with your breathing. Noticing the places in your body that move the most as you breathe. And where there's movement in the breathing, but the movement is just slight. And then once again, to take a few deeper breaths, gently, quietly, not too much. If it happens to be that you feel some resistance or holding back at the top of the in-breath, see if you can relax around that place of holding and resistance. Not ambitiously, but more as a expression of kindness to yourself and a willingness to relax there. And at the end of the exhale, is there also some holding back? And if so, can you relax and release at the end of the exhale? Maybe the exhale is a little bit longer. And then again, letting the breathing return to normal. And feel your breathing now. And perhaps by letting the thinking mind become quieter, it allows you to have more attention on feeling the body breathing. And then, ever so gently, maybe just very slightly, within the range of what could be considered normal breathing, see if there's some simple ways to adjust your breathing to make it more pleasant. A little bit slower, a little bit faster, a little fuller, or a little bit more shallow and a smaller breath. Maybe you find it a little bit more pleasant to breathe more fully into the belly or more fully into the chest. Or to really focus on the sensations of air going in and out through the nostrils. Then notice if there is any feelings of pleasure or pleasantness in the breathing, that it's pleasant to breathe. Maybe not so much your effort to breathe, but the sensations in the body of breathing. Is there anything about them that feels pleasant, enjoyable, or comforting? It can be very slight. Any small ways you can adjust around your breathing. Maybe by being aware of a smaller little spot in your body where it's most pleasant. Or maybe it's a broad awareness of the body breathing over a larger spot or the whole torso. And then as you exhale, relax your body more and in order to settle into your breathing. Settling in to be with your breathing for these minutes we're together. And if your mind wanders off in thought, when you begin again with your breathing, spend a few breaths re-establishing an enjoyable breath, a pleasant breathing. Even if it's just one little piece of the cycle of breathing, or maybe it's just re-establish a breathing which is feels a little bit better than what you were doing. Every time the mind wanders off, spend a little bit of time reconnecting to whatever is good about breathing in and breathing out. Let the thinking mind become quieter so you can be in your body more. Feeling the embodied experience of breathing. relax your belly as you breathe. Maybe it's more pleasant to breathe a little bit further behind, to feel the area just a little bit in the back of where you feel breathing. Not so much exactly in the center of your breathing area, but kind of like the little bit in the back of it, just behind it or in the back side of it, so that maybe there's a little bit less sense of control, or there's a lighter, more delicate feeling of breathing. And while you're focusing on breathing, so your central vision, central awareness is on breathing. Peripherally, see if you can have the body be allowing, receptive. The body is open, willing to experience the influence of breathing. It's kind of like breathing is a gentle wind that spreads its influence across the body, or a light that's been turned on that glows outwards. Letting the body be receptive, allowing for whatever influence the focus on breathing might have. Not looking for something particular, just available, with breathing at the center. Quietly receiving the body's breathing. And perhaps breathing within whatever larger context of pleasure or joy or contentment there might be. Whatever larger feeling of wholeness, calmness. So breathing is at the center of a wider field of goodness, wholeness, settledness, pleasure or joy, happiness. The thinking mind becomes quieter, so attention can better feel and sense the fullness of the way breathing spreads its influence out into the goodness around it, the wholeness around it. And there might be ways that you do not feel calm or do not feel pleasure, that you're uncomfortable. It's okay. But there might also be, in addition to that, around it, underneath it, in the middle of it, somewhere, the opposite feelings. A wholeness, a calmness that holds it all or can accept it all. And an ability to just stay gently aware of the breathing, the rhythm of breathing, so you're not preoccupied by the discomfort. It can be there, but let it be just a piece of the picture in the background. You just breathing. And sitting here quietly at the end of this meditation, is there anything that feels more settled for you, calmer for you, having done this meditation? In some way or other, do you feel better than you were when you started the meditation? And if you do, if you would like, you could offer the goodness of your meditation, how you're calmer, more settled, maybe even a little happier, or peaceful. Offer that for the welfare and happiness of others, or dedicate it. Let it be dedicated in some way or other, that you use that it's the basis for benefiting the world, out into the world. May it be a force, may it be an avenue, a support for bringing greater comfort and peace, calm, joy, love into the world. And may we do that a little bit actively, not just as a wish, but as an inspiration for being concerned for the welfare of others. May it be that this meditation is dedicated to the welfare and happiness of others. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be free. May all beings be peaceful. And may our love and our care support that possibility. So, I thought that before kind of going further with anapanasati, with this practice of mindfulness of breathing, to kind of start over again in a little bit way, in a maybe a little different way, and stay more with the most basic aspect of the practice. And over these weeks that I've been doing this, I've offered a variety of maybe subtly different ways of being with the breath and breathing, and different ways, little different each time. And it isn't that you have to remember all those ways, but rather maybe some of them work for you, inspire you in some way, and it can be a basis of how you practice. And so, the wider range that I give, perhaps the more likely you'll find something, and maybe you'll piece together parts of it, the subtle different ways of being with the breathing and work with the breathing and the meditation and breath. And I also wanted to kind of just stay real basic today, rather than moving further along the steps. as I said, I think yesterday, in some ways we're going through slowly, in some ways we're going through it very fast. And, maybe it would be ideal to spend a year going through the steps. And so it's on Monday, we'll start, and I'll go a little bit further. And the next stages of it, next steps of it, are quite fascinating, or very, very significant for this working with this meditation practice. But before we go on that way, I wanted to maybe take some questions from you. We've been doing this breath meditation now for a few weeks, and maybe it would be nice if you had a chance, a few of you had a chance to ask some questions, and if you can put them in the chat. And then I'll try to respond, and maybe the questions that I pick out of the chat, hopefully they are relevant for many of you, and be interesting to kind of have some, at least interesting for me to get some feedback or some hearing about, learning a little bit about the kind of questions you have, or challenges you have with it, or joys you have with it, or something. And the ways, if there are a lot of chat questions, sometimes I can't really follow them in order and they're in place because they passed by so quickly, and I try to do a little bit that way, but maybe we can think of it more as I'm pulling questions out of a hat than doing it in sequence. And so someone said I experienced anxiety, and there's no question, but it's interesting that anxiety I think it comes from Greek word to choke, and to not really be able to breathe fully. And so it's kind of working the edge of where the breathing is held or resisted, or is sometimes can be helpful with anxiety. Kind of expanding it, relaxing that. How can this help with severe chronic pain? It might not help. I mean, I can't promise you that this will help. There are plenty of people who find that breath meditation can help with severe pain. Certainly, I've had lots of severe pain in meditation, but not chronic, but certainly severe at times. And one of the surprises is to discover that it's possible to feel joy and pain at the same time. It's possible to be calm and feel pain at the same time. It's kind of like two different sides, two different parts, different aspects of our being. And often if we identify too much with the pain, or we're too preoccupied with it, or too caught up in it, then that influences kind of the inner state of how we are. But if we don't identify too with it, or aren't too preoccupied with it, it's there, and we don't ignore it. Then our inner state of our emotional state, our mood and all that, doesn't have to be tied to it. And so the inner state can be peaceful or calm. And that doesn't necessarily make the pain go away, but it creates a different context for being with the pain, so that the pain isn't the primary influence on us, but there's something inside which is an influence that might actually influence the pain in some way. I've also, when I've had severe pain in meditation or in life, I sometimes have just breathed through it and around the place of pain. And it depends a little bit, probably what kind of pain it is, but sometimes just breathing through it and or with it, I don't identify with it so much, and there's a little sense of relaxation, a little sense of something releases then, and if nothing, what releases is that my preoccupation with it. There's much more that can be said about pain, but for now, have you experienced all 16? Sure. Sometimes I've experienced them sequentially, one to the other, usually, but sometimes it's more random. Sit down to meditate, and I find myself different points of the steps, or I'll jump ahead, or it seems I go through it quickly, and one of the steps becomes more the predominant one for the day, and so it's. But yeah. What does it mean when the body disappears? And there's no question mark. So That's already disappeared too. Generally, when the body disappears in meditation, it means we're concentrated. It means the thinking mind has become quiet enough that that we're not conceptualizing about the body. It turns out that it's a little hard to imagine, if you have never experienced it, but it turns out that a lot of the ways in which we experience the body is mediated through our thoughts and ideas, through the activity of the mind that constructs the body. And so, for example, with eyesight, when seeing, we have all these little photon light particles travel into the eye. They get turned upside down in the eye and go against the retina, and then there's these electrical signals, the nerves that send these signals up into the brain, and then the brain reconstructs the signals into something which is a simile of the world out there, the world that was seen. And sometimes that reconstruction is not accurate, as when you see a twig on the ground and first you see it as a snake, and or I've seen people in the distance in a crowd, strangers, but for a moment I thought it was a friend of mine because there was enough similarity, and then I filled in the blank to kind of see my friend, and then I looked more carefully, and no, it's not my friend. So the reconstruction process is an activity the mind does. As the mind gets calmer, it's not reconstructing so much. And as it doesn't reconstruct, it's not taking the signals, or doesn't have the signals from the body to reconstruct, and it just and it feels like the body's disappearing. And sometimes it disappears entirely. And I've actually sometimes thought, had to open my eyes in meditation to make sure that I was still here, because it just felt so, empty. Sometimes there's an intermediate stage where the mind is still reconstructing sensations, but it's not really doing it accurately anymore. And so sometimes people's in meditations, they'll feel really like they get elongated, like they're about to touch the ceiling, or they feel really squat. Their hands feel like they're getting really big. Usually it's not particularly, unusual. It's just kind of little perceptual distortion, and it's usually a particular stage. And then when people go deep, it also doesn't last for too long, and then after a while, the capacity to settle and get more concentrated settles in, and that perceptual distortion stops. Is it important to follow the steps in order? Like I just said, no. Sometimes it's helpful to do so because it can help the concentration. Just you're on task and you just kind of do it. And sometimes it's not to do it on task, to do a technique and kind of follow something makes the mind too busy. And sometimes what happens is we start with the first one. We just start with breath meditation and getting settled in. And then rather than following this, implying and following the steps exactly, we're recognizing as we deepen the practice, we recognize the steps, we recognize where we are. And because we can recognize it, maybe it becomes a little fuller, and we can let it become fuller and more complete. And then it just, on its own, it moves into the next step, and into the next step. And I prefer that way, rather than kind of intentionally moving ahead when, it's a time to move ahead now. It's more like you do your practice, and you just kind of allow it to unfold in its own way. And then sometimes it jumps around. It doesn't have to be the same linear steps. How to work with controlling breath. This is really common. I think the most useful thing to do is not worry about it. And don't be bothered by it. Allow yourself to have a controlled breath. And you can cultivate just as strong mindfulness and concentration with a controlled breath that with a breath that's not controlled. It's not the breath that is the main issue. It's really the main issue is the quality of the attention you bring. Also, if you're not bothered with it, you're more likely to get out of its way. When we're bothered by a controlled breath, we actually in some subtle way reinforce it, and it makes it more difficult to let go. Also, it can be very interesting to become a connoisseur of the controlled breath. Just be content to have a controlled breath, and then get to know it really well. Like, where exactly is the sense of control? Where's the tightness, the resistance, the pushing? What are the emotions that are connected to it? Are there anything emotional? Any beliefs connected to it? Just really get to know it inside and out. And sometimes that really getting to know it, sometimes it's a little trick, because after a while, focusing on it that way directly kind of disarms the control. And sometimes you discover something interesting that needs to be relaxed and released. Then it becomes easier to do it. So that's one of the things I would do. Another thing that I've done, I've done so much of this over the years that depending on times, I've done different things. Sometimes when I had a controlled breath, I imagined that I was bringing my attention from the back forward, like going in through the back door, my back rib cage, and just feeling it in the back rib cage, where there's very little sense of control in the back rib cage. And I felt the breath there for a while, and then that kind of relaxed the control in the front. And then I slowly move my attention forward, gingerly, without kind of triggering the control. I have a challenge in the out-breath smaller and belly tight. Your suggestion observing the end of the in-breath and at the end of the out-breath is helpful, since I do get anxious there. So any thoughts about that? I think a little bit same as with the control. It's very, very significant just simply to recognize and observe what we're actually doing. And there's a tendency when we see something about ourselves to have judgments or reactions or think it should be different. But don't underestimate how very significant it is that you're just observing it and seeing it. And it might be all you need to do. And I've had all kinds of ways in which, I've been anxious or tight in my breathing, controlling my breathing, all kinds of things about it, that I just allowed myself to feel it, know it, and then just continued with the breathing. Kind of like the breathing is just a massage for it. And I find it interesting that as a massage, some point in the in-breath is more like the heart of the massage, and then like pushing it and then relaxing. Sometimes the top of the in-breath, sometimes the end of the out-breath. Depends what's going on. And just kind of like be with the rhythm, and find a way to be really content, like you're in it for the long term. Like you're not trying to fix it, you're not concerned about it, not just recognize, it's unpleasant, it's tight, it's controlled, there's anxiety, and I just breathe with it, we're going to be friends, and just breathe and breathe. And that kind of attitude sometimes is a very effective way to, over time, the things just settle without us being involved in all kinds of mental preoccupations, and that often just kind of stir it up even more sometimes. Yes, let's do another Zoom soon to chat with Sangha. Yeah, we'll do it. Maybe we can do it next week. It depends a little bit about, it depends whether I have time. And right now I have a number of things I'm having to take care of in my life that makes it a little harder. Any idea for trauma survivors and disassociation? Sometimes I may think I'm concentrated, maybe I'm disassociated. Yeah. I mean, certainly trauma survivors have their own path and the care that's needed for breath meditation and for meditation in general. And it's a noble path. It's a dignified path for people who've had trauma to work through and work with their trauma in meditation and all that. But it often needs a little different kind of attention than the kind of the basic, usual, instructions that I would give. Usually what's really good is a lot of compassion and a lot of care, a lot of generosity to oneself, and a lot of patience with it all. and permission to not have to go headlong into the trauma or the fear or something. It's fine to be at the edges of it, and it's fine to avoid it, or it's fine to breathe with it without fixing it or doing anything with it. So you can find exactly, or to pull out. When trauma responses arises in meditation, a very helpful skill to develop is to kind of end the meditation, or kind of come out of that state and revive oneself, or come back to normal a little bit, and develop that skill. So there's confidence that as you go into it, that if you really wanted to, you could come out. So at some point, if you want to explore and go further with the sensations of trauma, that you do so with a lot of confidence, that at a moment's notice you can pull yourself out. And maybe there is this association, and sometimes it's not a crime to be disassociated. So it's okay within reason, and so if it just happens in meditation, maybe it also has a helpful function. Sometimes there's a break, or there is a kind of relaxation that can happen with some disassociation. So not to be in a hurry to make it wrong to do that. And then, but if it starts being a problem, or you suspect it is a problem, then the focus on the body, I find, is one way to kind of work through disassociation, because dissociation is more often than not associated with not being connected to the body. And and then getting professional help, I think, is good. If you really think it's a big issue, it's really good to find a professional help. And, there are now, in some areas, therapists who know about mindfulness and Buddhism and meditation, and they can be particularly helpful for people meditating. After the 16 steps, this will be the last one. After the 16 steps, would you make letting go the next theme? Yeah, that certainly can be. But we'll see letting go is built into the Anapanasati. And so next week we'll get to, at the end of each tetrad, there is some quality of letting go, in the family of letting go. And so we'll see next week when we get to the 8th step that has letting go. And the first step, the end of the first tetrad, is relaxing or tranquilizing the bodily formations. And that's in the family of letting go. And so at the end of each tetrad, there's a letting go kind of quality. So we'll do some of that here. Well, thank you for your questions, and I'll read the rest of the questions, and so I get some sense of your concerns, and I appreciate this chance to be this way with you. And I look forward to next week and continuing on this process. Thank you very much.